Hello everyone. Today's video is about famous autistic people and people on the autism spectrum who have become very well known in our society, whether that be because they have a particular skill or any other reason. I do hope you learn a lot from this talk. This video was requested by Animal Singh, one of my subscribers. Now, I'd like to ask all of my other subscribers here, if you have any other video suggestions, like any requests for ideas for me to talk about on this channel, please do hit me up in the comments below, and I might consider doing this, possibly, depending on what it is. Now, here is a list of different autistic people who I know of, who are very well known. First, we have Stephen Wiltshire. Now, he is an artist on the autistic spectrum. He was diagnosed with autism as a young child, and he didn't speak for a very long time. His language was very delayed. I think I've read online that he didn't even learn to speak till he was 9 years old, and even I wasn't as late as this. He does have an extraordinary talent, and he's had this talent ever since he was a small boy. And this is the talent of art. He has a photographic memory where he can just look at a building once and then draw everything perfectly precisely. Or he can get flown around a city in an airplane, in a helicopter, and draw the whole city from memory. This is quite an extraordinary talent. I think he was one of the very first famous autistics I ever found out about. Back when I was 14, I learned about this man. My mum read me an article from the newspaper, and I was like amazed that someone who was autistic could have such an extraordinary talent that stems from autism specifically. Next, we have the pianist Derek Paravicini. Now, I have actually had the pleasure to meet this man once. I met him in about 2017, I think it was. And it was a real honour to meet him. It really, truly was, as I've known about him for a long time, so it was great to meet him in person. As well as being autistic, he has a severe intellectual disability and is blind on top of this. However, on the piano, he's an absolute genius. You can request any piece of music for him to play, and he'll play it perfectly precisely with every note. I remember requesting him to play Thomas the Tank Engine, and he could do it brilliantly. And if there's any piece of music request from that he doesn't know, you just need to get it up on your phone and play it, and he'll remember it all he'll be able to play it completely from memory. Next we have Dr. Temple Grandin, who was one of the very first, I think maybe even the first, autistic person to ever put into words what it is like to be autistic. Now, these days, there are loads of autistic advocates who are talking about how autism affects them, but at the time, this was quite rare. Temple Grandin was one of the very first people to put into words what it's like. And Temple Grandin also has had a very successful life despite being on the autistic spectrum. She hasn't let this disability hold her back. However, what also made Temple Grandin's story especially encouraging for me is she came from a similar background to myself. Like, she had the very severe, full-blown traits of classic autism as a young child, just like I did. You know, she wasn't one of those people that appeared to be that was diagnosed much later, who had none of these developmental delays that I had. She had all of the full-blown traits, but despite this, has managed to live a very successful life and has managed to achieve a great deal. So this gave me a lot of hope when I was a teenager, because I was like, well, if Temple Grandin can succeed in life, maybe I can as well. Temple Grandin was one of these people that really gave me a lot of hope for my future. Of course, I probably won't ever be as successful as Temple Grandin, but it does still show that you can strive for as much as you can, hope to achieve as much as you can. Next, we have Susan Boyle. Now, Susan Boyle is a very well-known singer who appeared on Britain's Got Talent in, was it 2009? Yeah, 2009 it was. She appeared on Britain's Got Talent in 2009 and blew everyone away with her performance. Now, I believe that at the time she appeared on this programme, she was not diagnosed as autistic. I think they believed that she had a brain injury initially, but later, since then, she had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. She's clearly another example of someone who has a great, extraordinary talent when it comes to singing in this case, who happens to be on the autism spectrum. Next we have Aykroyd, the actor from Ghostbusters. That would be the film he's most well known for. He played Ray Stantz in Ghostbusters, and he has been diagnosed with both autism and Tourette's syndrome. But if you've seen him in that film, he's a really good actor. Then we have Tim Burton, who has made many films, mostly a lot of dark films, including films like Batman 1989, Edward Scissorhands, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from 2005, and many others as well. Now, he has never been officially diagnosed as autistic, but however, despite this, he does believe he is on the spectrum and he identifies as being autistic. Then we have Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland. Now, personally, I've never really been a big fan of this story. I remember as a kid, it really kind of always irritates me because of how irrational it was. And it felt like Alice was just going through one silly thing after another. So I never really enjoyed the story that much. However, it is interesting to believe that Lewis Carroll may have been autistic. Now, of course, autism was not a diagnosis at the time that Lewis Carroll was alive, but it is often theorised that he may have been on the autistic spectrum, as it did affect his social skills. And it's interesting when you think about this, because Alice in Wonderland is very much a story where every character is very unique. Now, my camera's battery switched out, so I had to switch to my phone. Now, where was I yet? Yeah, when you do think about the story of Alice in Wonderland, the world of Wonderland, which is like a dream world, it's very much full of strangeness, and every character is very unique and different. And you never know how a character is going to react, and it's like being in a different world, basically. And it's quite possible that maybe, if Lewis Carroll was autistic, maybe writing this story, he was writing how he saw the world. And that basically this is a bit like how he experienced things, basically, and this is how he was writing it. Now, it's highly possible maybe that was how he saw things. And I do also remember Robert Parton, another autistic advocate who I know, also used Alice in Wonderland as an example to describe what it's like being autistic. He mentioned about how autism is like being in Alice in Wonderland. Look, watch the clip here.
I compare it to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. You never know how a character is going to behave or what they are going to be like. Every character in us is unique. ASC is a bit like that. That is why it's so hard to tell that people exactly what is ASC, because each person is so different. ASC is a bit like Alice in Wonderland.
It's pretty interesting if he was writing about what it's like to be autistic, even though he didn't know what autism was at that point, obviously. And finally, we have Albert Einstein. Now, of course, again, autism wasn't around when he was alive. Well, I mean, autism was around, but it wasn't a diagnosis at the time he was living. And it is impossible to give an absolute diagnosis to someone who is no longer alive. But I do believe it is quite likely that Albert Einstein was on the autism spectrum. There is a lot of evidence to suggest this. I do remember hearing that he had a language delay as a young child, and he would use echolalia, where he'd repeat words and phrases that he had learned. This is very common among people who are on the autism spectrum, a very common classic autistic characteristic. And it was also said that he was very focused on physics. He's very much focused on this and not so much into social interaction and communicating with others around him. And he was very much obsessed with his routine as well. He loved routine. And this does sound like he could very well have been on the autistic spectrum. And now, thank you all for watching. I do hope you learned a lot from this talk. What famous autistic people do you know about? Who have I not mentioned? Or are there any famous people who you believe could be on the autism spectrum? Do comment below. And thank you all for watching. Take care. Goodbye for now.